All right, these are your notes for multiplying and dividing decimal numbers. So let's start with multiplying numbers. So remember to multiply decimals, and this is no different than what you've learned before, so it's just a reminder. We multiply as though they were whole numbers, not decimals. That's how I do it. I take out the decimal out. Remember, you do not have to line up the decimal point for multiplication. We only line up the decimal point for adding and subtracting. The next thing I would do is count how many numbers were behind the decimal point in your original problem. Move the decimal point that many places to the left in your answer. And then don't forget to determine your sign. So remember, a positive times a positive will give you a positive answer. A positive times a negative is a negative. A negative times a positive is a negative. And a negative times a negative will result in a positive answer. So right here, there's 3 examples that I want us to try. Again, just multiplication. So that remember, the first thing that I do is I always determine my signs first. So a negative times a negative will give me a positive. So I'm not going to write anything down here. That tells me my answer is going to be positive. Then I rewrite the problem, but I take the decimal out of it. So if I took the decimal out of it, it would look like 683 times 4. Okay, and I'm just going to solve that. So 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 8 is 32, plus 1 is 33. 4 times 6 is 24, plus 3 more is 27. So I've done my multiplication. Then I'm going to go back to the original problem, and I'm going to see how many numbers were behind the decimal point in both of my factors. So I had an 8, a 3, and a 4. So there were 3 numbers behind the decimal point altogether. So right now there is a decimal point in this answer. We just don't see it. It's at the very end. And any whole number, there's always a decimal point. It's at the end of the number. So I'm going to take my invisible decimal point and I'm going to move it 3 places to the left. So now I know it falls between the 2 and the 7. So my final answer is 2.732. And again, we already said it was positive because a negative times a negative is a positive. So my answer would be 2 and 732 thousandths. Okay, let's try this idea again. So a negative times a positive gives me a negative. So I'm going to put that in right away. And then I'm going to rewrite the problem taking out the decimal. So it would look like 43 times 15. Okay, so let's do that. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times 4 is 20, plus 1 is 21. Don't forget to bring down your 0. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 4 is 4. And then I'm going to add. So 5 plus 0 is 5. 1 plus 3 is 4. 2 plus 4 is 6. So I get 645 when I multiply those together. I'm going to go back up to the original problem and see how many numbers were behind decimals. So I have 2 numbers behind decimals. So I'm going to take my invisible decimal point that's right here. I'm going to move it 2 places to the left. So I know my answer is 6.45. And again, we already determined it was negative because a negative times a positive is a negative. Let's try it one more time. So I have 8 hundredths times negative 3 2/10. A positive times a negative is a negative. I'm going to rewrite the problem. So I have 32 times 8. Now, notice here it says 8 times 32, but I'm going to reverse it because it makes more sense to have 32 on the top and 8 on the bottom. And with multiplication, you're allowed to do that. This makes more sense than if I were to write this down. This looks funny. Okay, so we're going to leave it like this. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24, plus 1 is 25. Okay, again, I go back up. I say 1, 2, 3 numbers behind the decimal point. So I'm going to move my decimal 1, 2, 3 places to the left. So I'm going to say my answer is negative 0.256. If you don't put the 0 right there and just write negative 0.256, that's okay. So my final answer is negative 256 thousandths. So now we have a U try section. So you have two ways you can choose to do this. You can put it on pause, try it yourself and see how you do, or you can work through them with me. It's up to you. Okay, and we're not going to do this story problem today or at all, so you can put an X through it. All right, so if you want to know if you don't want to do it on your, or if you want to do it on your own, pause right now, and I'm going to put up the answers in a second. If you do want to do it with me, after I put up the answers, I'll start going through the problems. So pause if you want to try on your own now. Here are the correct answers for these 4 problems. Check and see how you did. Now, if you're someone that's trying to work with me, let's see what the correct answers should be. So I have 19.3 times 6/10. So I have a positive times a negative is a negative. I have 193 times 6 when I rewrite it, taking out my decimal, because this is easier for me to work with. So 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 9 is 54, plus 1 is 55. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 5 is 11. So I have 1158 as my answer. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to look at how many numbers are behind the decimal point. So I have a 3 and a 6. So that's 2 numbers behind the decimal point. So I'm going to move my decimal 2 places to the left. I'm going to have negative 11 and 58 hundredths as my answer. Okay, let's try this one. So I have a negative times a negative is a positive, so I'm not going to write anything down. I'm going to rewrite this taking out the decimal, so that's 53 times 28. I'm going to multiply. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 5 is 40, plus 2 is 42. Bring down my 0. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 5 is 10. I'm going to add 4 plus 0, 2 plus 6, 4 plus 0, and 1. So I have 1484. And now I got to figure out where my decimal belongs. So I see I have 2 numbers behind the decimal point, which means I need to move it 2 places to the left. So my answer is 14 and 84 hundredths. A negative times a negative is a positive, and when I multiply those together, I get 14 and 84 hundredths. All right, again, a negative times a positive is a negative. So I'm going to rewrite this as 229 times 31. I'm going to multiply. 1 times 9 is 9. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 2 is 2. Bring down my 0. 3 times 9 is 27. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8. 3 times 2 is 6. Now I just need to add. 9 plus 0 is 9. 2 plus 7 is 9. 2 plus 8 is 10. And 1 plus 6 is 7. I go back up here. I have 2 numbers behind the decimal point, so I'm going to move it 2 places to the left. I already determined that it was negative, so my answer is negative 70 and 99 hundredths. One more time. So I have a positive and a negative, which will give me a negative. I'm going to rewrite this as 187 times 45, taking out the decimal points. I'm going to multiply. 5 times 7 is 35. 5 times 8 is 40, plus 3 is 43. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 4 is 9. Don't forget to bring down your 0. 4 times 7 is 28. 4 times 8 is 32, plus 2 is 34. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. Okay, 5 plus 0 is 5. 3 plus 8 is 11. 1 plus 9 is 10, plus another 4 is 14. And 1 plus 7 is 8. I'm going to count how many numbers are behind the decimal point. So there's 1, 2, 4 numbers behind decimal point, so I need to move my decimal point 4 places to the left. So my answer is negative 0.8415. If I read that correctly, it would be negative 8,415 10,000ths. Let's try some division. So we're going to flip it to the back. So dividing decimals, you've learned how to divide decimals before. So again, this is review. The only thing that we're adding to it is the positive and negatives. So remember, when you divide decimals, move the decimal point in the divisor to the right so that it becomes a whole number. You can't divide by a decimal. You need to make it into a whole number. Okay, the next step says move the decimal point in the dividend the same amount of places to the right, and then bring the decimal point straight up into the answer. So let's try some of these. Here's my examples. So I'm going to set this up. Remember, the first one always goes in the box. So I have 24 and 1800ths divided by 2 and 6/10. So I have a negative divided by a positive, which is a negative. It says that I need to move the decimal point in the divisor. The divisor is the number on the outside of the symbol to the right so that it becomes a whole number. So if I move it to the right, I move it 1 place to the right. That means I have to move it 1 place to the right here, and I'm going to bring it straight up. Now with division, it's so super important that you keep things lined up and beautiful so that your decimal point ends up in the right spot. If you're someone that you know you're not very good at lining things up, I would highly suggest grid paper. I have a ton of it. If you ever want some grid paper, just ask. It'll help you keep things lined up for when you do your division. So now I'm going to divide. 26 cannot go into 2. It cannot go into 24. But it does go into 241. So we need to figure this out. 26 is pretty close to 25, and I'm really good at counting by 25s. That's like counting by quarters. So if I count by 25s, I have 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150, 175, 200, so that's 8 times. I think I can do it again. That will give me 225, and that's 9 times. And if I did it 10 times, that would be 250, which would be too much. So let's try 9 times and see how it works out for us. 9 times 6 is 54. And I just do it over here, just like it was a multiplication problem. 9 times 2 is 18, and 18 plus 5 is 23. I'm going to subtract. So really I have 41 minus 34. So I'm going to borrow here. And I get 7. And 7 is smaller than 26, so that's good. That means I can bring down my 8. So 26 goes into 8. All right, so again, if I was counting by 25, I'd go 25, 50, 75. So that means 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18. 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. Ooh, and no remainder. Wonderful. So I have 9.3 as my answer. 9 3/10 as my answer. So I have a negative divided by a positive is a negative. Okay. Negative 13 and 1400ths divided by negative 1 and 8/10. Okay, so negative divided by negative is a positive. I'm not going to write anything down. The 13 and 1400ths goes inside the box. The 1 and 8/10 on the outside. Move your decimal in the divisor, which means I then have to move it in the dividend, and I have to be really careful to bring it straight up. So I'm going to divide by 18. 18 does not go into 1. It does not go into 13, but 18 does go into 131. And 18 is close to 20, and I know I'm good at counting by 20s, so I'm going to start there. So I have 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, and then if I did it again, that would be too much. That would be 140, and that's 7 times. So I might try 6, or I might try 7 because I am counting by 20s and it's really 18. And 140 is close to 131, so I might want to try 7. So it doesn't matter which one you start with. Because I know the answer, we're going to start with 7. Okay, so 7 times 8 is 56. 7 times 1 is 7 plus 5 is 12. I'm going to subtract. I need to borrow. So 11 minus 6 is 5, and everything else is zeros. 5 is smaller than 18. Now, just for fun, let's check this out. So if I would have done 6 instead of 7, I would have 18 times 6 is, or 8 times 6 is 48, and 6 times 1 plus 4 is 10. That would give me 108. And when I do my subtraction, 131 minus 108, I would end up with 23 left over. And 23 is bigger than 18, so that would tell me that that 6 wasn't big enough. I would have to do 7. All right, but we use 7, and that's perfect, so we're going to bring down the 4. 18 goes into 54. So let's try. 18 plus 18 is 36, plus another 18. Guess what? That gives me 54. So my answer is 7 3/10. And we already said a negative times a negative is or a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So my answer is 7 3/10. All right, let's try another. I have a positive divided by a negative. So I know my answer is going to be negative. Let's try the problem. 3 and 192 thousandths goes in the box. 42 hundredths goes on the outside of the box. I need to move my decimal point 2 times this time to get it to a whole number, which means I have to move it 2 times here and bring it straight up, right between that 9 and the 2. So 42 does not go into 3, nor does it go into 31, but it does go into 319. And 42 is close to 40, so I'm going to count by 40s. So I have 40, 80, 120, 160, 200, 240, 280, 320 is next, and that's 8, which is slightly bigger than 319, but I was counting by 40s, not 42s, so 8 should be perfect. Oh, sorry. I was at 7. So 7 should be perfect. Miscounted my fingers. So 7 times 2 is 14. 7 times 4 is 28, plus 1 is 29. Okay, let's subtract and see. 9 minus 4 is 5, and 31 minus 29 is 25. And 25 is smaller than 42, so that works. I'm going to bring down the 2. And I'm going to do it again. I know it's going to be less than 7 because 7 gave me 294. So let's count by 40s again. So I have 40, 80, 120, 160, 200, 240 is 6 times. If I do it again, that would give me 280, which is a lot bigger than 252, actually. So we know it needs to be 6 times. So 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 4 is 24, plus 1 is 25. There we go. 7.6. And we already said it was a negative. A negative or a positive divided by a negative is a negative. Negative 7 6/10. So again, you can pause it and try these 4 on your own. I'll put up the answers, or you can continue watching and work them out. So if you're trying to do it on your own, pause it now. Here are the correct answers. If you're going to work through them with me, let's do them together. So I have 75 and 53 hundredths divided by 9 tenths. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. So I'm going to write 75 and 53 hundredths divided by 9 tenths. Move the decimal point 1 here. Move it one place over here. Bring it straight up. So 9 cannot go into 7, but 9 can go into 75 8 times. 8 times 9 is 72. I subtract, I have 3 left over, which is smaller than 9. Always do that self-check. So I can bring down the 5. 9 can go into 35, let's see, 3 times. 3 times 9 is 27. I'm going to subtract. I get 8. And 8 is smaller than 9, so that's good. I can bring down the 3. 9 can go into 83 9 times. That'll give me 81. Oh no, I still have a remainder. And you know what? That's okay because I know what to do if I have a remainder. I just need to start bringing down zeros. So 9 can go into 20 2 times. 2 times 9 is 18. Uh-oh, I have a remainder of 2 again. So I know this is going to start to repeat. The 2 is going to repeat. So I already said a negative divided by a positive is a negative. Then I have 83 and 92 hundredths, but the 2 repeats. So I put a bar over the 2. And that can happen. Don't think because you have a remainder that you did it incorrectly. You could have to bring down zeros. Okay, the next one. I have a positive divided by a negative. That would give me a negative answer. I have 1.136 divided by 1 6/10. I move the decimal in the divisor. So I move the decimal in the dividend, and I bring it straight up. 16 cannot go into 1. It also cannot go into 11, but it does go into 113. So I'm going to count by 15s instead of 16s. So I have 15, 30, 45, 60, 75, 90, 105. If I did it again, that would take me up to 120, which is a little too big. So I have 7 fingers up, so I'm going to say 7. 7 times 6 is 42. 7 times 1 is 7 plus 4 is 11. Well, look at that. I subtract, I have just 1 left over. Perfect. And bring down the 6. 16 goes into 16. I know just 1 time, and I know that gives me 16, so no remainder. So my answer is negative 0 and 71 hundredths. Okay, negative divided by negative is a positive. I have 5 and 49 hundredths divided by 6 and 1/10. Move the decimal in my divisor, so I move the decimal in my dividend. 61 cannot go into 5. It can also not go into 54, but it does go into 549. So I'm going to count by 60s. Guys, this is easy to do. It's like counting by 6s, but we just add a 0 to the end of it. Okay, so 60. So let's see. 60, I'll count like this. 60, 120, 180, 240, 300, 360, 420, 480, still not quite there. Let's try another one, 480, 540. Oh, that seems like it would work perfect, and that was 9 fingers. So 9 times 1 is 9, and 9 times 6 is 54. Oh, look at that. Just one step. So a negative divided by a negative, we said was a positive, and my answer is 9/10. Okay, last one. Negative divided by a positive is a negative. So I have 0.5496 divided by 1.2. Right? So move the decimal 1 place to the right in the divisor, which means I do it in the dividend and bring it straight up. 12 does not go into 0. 12 does not go into 5, but 12 does go into 54. And you should be able to count by 12s pretty easily. So I have 12, 24, 36, 48, and if I did it again, that would be 60, which would be too big. So that's 4, and we said 4 times 12 is 48. I'm going to have to borrow here. 14 minus 8 is 6, which is smaller than 12, so I'm going to bring down my 9. 12 goes into 69. Well, 4 times gave us 48. Another time gives us 60. So I'm going to say 5 times. 5 times 12 is 60. Subtract, I have 9 left over. I bring down my 6. You know it's going to have to be more than 5 times because 5 gave me 60. So if I keep counting, okay, another time would be 75. Or sorry, it would be 72. And then 84. And then 96. So that's 8 times. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 1 plus another one is 9. So 96 works perfect. So I have 0.458. We already said it's going to be negative. So my final answer is negative 458 thousandths. We are not going to do these order of operations type problems, so we can actually skip those. Your next job is to complete the multiplying and dividing decimals practice. There's a little bit of practice on both types of problems. Try it on your own, submit it. If you get a 70% or higher, then you will receive the credit for it. If you get lower than a 70%, you need to try again, see if you can find your mistake, and you can do it as many times as you need to.